Hello and welcome to Read Aloud with me, Dan. Today we're going to read from The Right of Nations to Self-Determination. This is by Vladimir Lenin from 1914, just maybe a year or so after Stalin's work on the same topic came out. This work is more specifically directed at Rosa Luxemburg, the Polish Marxist, and others who share her same arguments about Clause 9 of the Russian Marxist National Program. So we're sort of here in the weeds, but I'm finding this to be illuminating and is deepening my my understanding of the topic of nationality and of the nation and of generally the issues that were being dealt with at the time. And we're about to read from chapter 4. If you haven't read chapters 1 through 3, you should obviously do that. And I do believe if you haven't read Stalin's work on the same topic, entitled Marxism and the National Question, then you should read that before you read any of this. Welcome in, comrades. Very nice to be with you today. I hope you're having a nice day. I'm going to read a summary of chapter 4 before we begin and after we finish, as a way to bookend what we're reading today. As we read, you're encouraged to discuss in chat or in the comments below if you're watching the replay what your thoughts are, how this applies to history or to current times or even the future. Anyways, in chapter 4, entitled Practicality, I think it should say practicality derisively, in the national question, Lenin, without providing any quotes on the matter, I will say, takes on Rosa Luxemburg and et al.'s claim that Clause 9 of the Russian Marxists' national program, quote, contains nothing practical, and that by supporting the right to secession, we, the Russian Marxists, are supporting the bourgeois nationalism of the oppressed nations. And Lenin counters these arguments with the argument that a demand for practicality in the national question is a demand to essentially break on foundational Marxist principles, since, quote, the working class supports the bourgeoisie only in order to secure national peace, in order to secure equal rights, and to create the best conditions for the class struggle. And that's what it's all about, baby. The class struggle. Welcome in, welcome again. This is Read Aloud, and we're about to do the reading today. We're reading from the Marxist-Leninist Reading Hub edition of The Right of Nations to Self-Determination. And I've taken a PDF of their ebook and translated it into an EPUB so that I can read it for you here today. And again, welcome in. Please let me know what you're thinking as we're reading. Love your face. Here we go. Chapter 4. Practicality in the national question. Rosa Luxemburg's argument that Chapter 9 of our program contains nothing practical has been seized upon by the opportunists. Rosa Luxemburg is so delighted with this argument that in some parts of her article, this slogan is repeated 8 times on a single page. She writes, Clause 9 gives no practical lead on the day-by-day policy of the proletariat, no practical solution of national problems. Let us examine this argument, which elsewhere is formulated in such a way that it makes Clause 9 look meaningless, or else commits us to support all national aspirations. So, is Clause 9, the right of nations to self-determination, meaningless? Or does it mean that the Russian Marxists then should support all national movements, all national aspirations, such as every national movement to secede? That's the question. What does the demand for practicality in the national question mean? It means one of the three things: support for all national aspirations. The answer yes or no to the question of secession by any nation. Or that national demands are in general immediately practicable. Let us examine all three possible meanings of the demand for practicality. The bourgeoisie, which naturally assumes the leadership at the start of every national movement, says that support for all national aspirations is practical. That's what the bourgeoisie says. Oh yeah, you should. Oh yeah, do it. Make sure you do that. That's practical. After all, the bourgeoisie is going to be the principal leader of all national movements. Reading on. However, the proletariat's policy in the national question, as in all others, supports the bourgeoisie only in a certain direction. But it never coincides with the bourgeoisie's policy. You can imagine a Venn diagram. Every now and then, the bourgeoisie's actions may be supported by the proletariat. It says, the working class supports the bourgeoisie only in order to secure national peace, which the bourgeoisie cannot bring about completely, and which can be achieved only with complete democracy. I think he's talking there about like even in the workplace. But obviously, complete democracy in the nation. He says, again, the working class supports the bourgeoisie only in order to secure national peace, in order to secure equal rights, and to create the best conditions for the class struggle. And gosh, isn't that what it's all about? Therefore, it is in opposition to the practicality of the bourgeoisie that the proletarians advance their principles in the national question. They always give the bourgeoisie only conditional support. Only conditional support. What every bourgeoisie is out for in the national question is either privileges for its own nation or exceptional advantages for it. That's what they want. So, with regards to the national question, if the proletariat was supporting the bourgeoisie in their national movement, and then the bourgeoisie started asking for privileges or exceptional advantages with regards to the national question, would the proletariat continue supporting the bourgeoisie? What every bourgeoisie wants for is privileges and exceptional advantages. This is called being practical to them. The proletariat is opposed to all privileges, to all exclusiveness. This is foundational stuff that I'm highlighting here. To demand that it should be practical means following the lead of the bourgeoisie, falling into opportunism. The demand for a yes or no reply to the question of secession in the case of every nation may seem a practical one. He's talking now about the second possible meaning of the demand of practicality here. One of three things. The second thing, the demand for a yes or no reply to the question of secession in the case of every nation. That's what it may mean to be practical. That's what he's saying. He says, may seem a practical one. In reality, it's absurd. You can't just outright say you support the policy of every nation to secession without looking at the concrete historical conditions. It's absurd. It's metaphysical. It's without regard to history. It's metaphysical. He says it's metaphysical in theory, while in practice it leads to subordinating the proletariat to the bourgeois policy. The bourgeoisie always places its national demands in the forefront, and does so in categorical fashion. With the proletariat, however, these demands are subordinated to the interests of the class struggle. And that's not good. You get that, right? Okay. Theoretically, you cannot say in advance whether the bourgeois democratic revolution will end in a given nation seceding from another nation, or in its equality with the latter. In either case, the important thing for the proletariat is to ensure the development of its class. That's what's important. Okay, I'm taking notes over here. For the bourgeoisie, it's important to hamper this development by pushing the aims of its own nation before those of the proletariat. Ooh, wow. Holy shit, does that not explain a lot of bourgeois propaganda? Oh, wow, is that why they keep talking about this dumb shit instead of helping people? Oh my gosh. Maybe there's a reason. Who owns the media? I don't know. One day we'll find that out. Anyways, until then, he says that's why the proletariat confines itself, so to speak, to the negative demand for recognition of the right to self-determination without giving guarantees to any nation and without undertaking to give anything at the expense of another nation. That is the right of nations to self-determination. That's it. I mean, he keeps spelling it out. Lenin says this may not be practical, but it is, in effect, the best guarantee for the achievement of the most democratic of all possible solutions. The proletariat needs only such guarantees, whereas the bourgeoisie of every nation requires guarantees for its own interest, regardless of the position of or the possible disadvantages to other nations. The bourgeoisie is most of all interested in the feasibility of a given demand. Hence, the invariable policy of coming to terms with the bourgeoisie of other nations to the detriment of the proletariat. Oh, that's why it's bad. For the proletariat, however, the important thing is to strengthen its class against the bourgeoisie and to educate the masses in the spirit of consistent democracy and socialism. And remember what he says here, and you may disagree, but we want to secure the best conditions for the class struggle, okay? That's what you want to do. So rewind it, go backwards here. How do you do that? Create secure equal rights. Complete democratization. How do you do that? Secure national peace. Look at what's happening in Syria right now. How's the class struggle doing right now as these national tensions have peaked? Why has that happened? Because they've lost any semblance of any kind of democracy. Why is that happening? Well, national peace is breaking down. Thanks, Obama. Hey, actually, that worked out. Where was I? Again, he says, for the proletariat, the important thing is to strengthen its class against the bourgeoisie and to educate the masses in the spirit of consistent democracy and socialism. Trying to create the conditions under which the class struggle can succeed. Lenin says, this may not be practical as far as the opportunists are concerned, but it is the only real guarantee, the guarantee of the greater national equality and peace, despite the feudal landlords and the nationalist bourgeoisie. He keeps reminding us that the bourgeoisie is inherently nationalist, and any, I guess you could infer that like any section of the proletariat that is also nationalist is pretty much bourgeois nationalist. They're proletarian bourgeoisified nationalists, or I'm maybe mixing up the words, but you get the idea. They're bourgeoisified. They're nationalists, but nationalism is inherently bourgeois. Where was I? Reading on, the whole task of the proletarians in the national question is unpractical from the standpoint of the nationalist bourgeoisie in every nation. Because the proletarians, opposed as they are to nationalism of every kind, unless they're dupes, right, demand abstract equality. They demand, as a matter of principle, that there should be no privileges, however slight. Failing to grasp this, Rosa Luxemburg, by her misguided eulogy of practicality, has opened the door wide for the opportunists, and especially for opportunist concessions to great Russian nationalism. Rosa's mad that by saying that the nations have rights, the right to self-determination, that Lenin and the Russian Marxists are somehow caving in to the Polish bourgeoisie. And Lenin says, if you don't take this seriously, you're actually playing into the hands of a much bigger bourgeoisie, a more fundamental problem. He says, why Great Russian? Because the Great Russians in Russia are an oppressor nation. And opportunism in the national question will, of course, find expression among oppressed nations, otherwise than among oppressor nations. You've got to understand this. On the plea that its demands are practical, the bourgeoisie of the oppressed nations will call upon the proletariat to support its aspirations unconditionally. The most practical procedure is to say a plain yes in favor of the secession of a particular nation, rather than in favor of all nations having the right to secede. The proletariat is opposed to such practicality, he says, while recognizing equality and equal rights to a national state. It values above all and places foremost the alliance of the proletarians of all nations, and assesses any national demand any national separation from the angle of the workers' class struggle. This call for practicality is in fact merely a call for uncritical acceptance of bourgeois aspirations. By supporting the right to secession, we are told, you are supporting the bourgeois nationalism of the oppressed nations. This is what Rosa Luxemburg says. She's echoed by Simkovsky, the opportunist, who incidentally is the only representative of liquidationist ideas on this question in the liquidationist newspaper. Strange bedfellows, he says. Our reply to this is no. It is to the bourgeoisie that a practical solution of this question is important. To the workers, the important thing is to distinguish the principles of the two trends. Insofar as the bourgeoisie of the oppressed nation fights the oppressor, we are always, in every case, and more strongly than anyone else, in favor. For we are the staunchest and most consistent enemies of oppression. But insofar as the bourgeoisie of the oppressed nation stands for its own bourgeois nationalism, we stand against it. We fight against the privileges and violence of the oppressor nation, and do not in any way condone strivings for privileges on the part of the oppressed nation. If in our political agitation we fail to advance and advocate the slogan of the right to secession, we shall play into the hands not only of the bourgeoisie, but also of the feudal landlords and the absolutism of the oppressor nation. Kautsky long ago used this argument against Rosa Luxemburg, and the argument is indisputable.